Hey guys, what's going on? So we've been playing a little bit of the beta for Fallout 76 and we're hoping to get a lot more time today after I'm done with this video. Today is going to be a long beta day, so I'm pretty excited about that. The game so far has been pretty fun. There's a lot of graphical issues, but you know, hopefully they'll figure that out and solve them before the game actually releases. But today I wanted to talk about the Vault 76 and some of the new things that we have discovered. That has been made pretty clear to us now that we actually got some time on in the video game. But very importantly, what we have discovered is what could very well be one of the reasons, if not the reason, why Vault-Tec has been doing the things that they have been doing. So just to bring it back a little bit, let's talk about Vault-Tec. So Vault-Tec is a company that makes the vaults. The vaults, however, were never particularly designed to help people, which can come as a little bit of a shock for those of you who might not be, you know, maybe too interested in the lore of Fallout or haven't really paid too much attention to the lore of Fallout. The vaults were there to make experiments on the people that were stuck inside. They were never intended for it to save people necessarily. Only a few of them were. So the United States government, you know, they sort of funded this expedition, this process of making the vaults, but they were not aware of what Vault-Tec was really doing. Now, Vault-Tec made about 120. We don't really know the exact number. We know that it is definitely more than 100, and we have seen records of there being it was like a Vault 120 or something that we've seen in some of the cut content for Fallout 4, but we don't know exactly how many there are. But we know that only 17 of those vaults were actually made to house people and save them from the apocalypse in order to have them released later when the, you know, kind of like the radioactive nonsense just sort of, you know, left Earth. But most of those vaults were made to experiment on people. And we're talking about kind of, you know, some fucked up type of experiments, mostly psychological experiments. Some vaults, you know, you would have, for example, people. You would put in 1,000 people with gambling addictions, put them into a vault, and then have every single major decision that they would have to make in the vault be decided via gambling, right? And then they would study, Vault-Tec would study what effects this would have on the people living inside, and then I suppose get that information and do something with that information. There were some experiments where they would put in 999 males with one female, and then that's Vault 69, which I think is hilarious. There's all kinds of things, tons of experiments. There's this one where they forced the people living inside of the vault to sacrifice one person every year, and of course the people were threatened that if they didn't do that sacrifice, then they would all be killed instead. And then Vault-Tec would of course be studying what happens to those individuals, how they react to these circumstances. As you can see, there's a lot of psychological, sort of maybe moral or philosophical sort of studies done on these non-consenting people who were forced into these vaults because of the war. And then some studies were actually technological, some studies were scientific, you know, trying to figure out how to solve, you know, how to cure certain diseases, how to study certain plants, etc., etc. The problem is that we as players, we never truly knew what was the main purpose of these studies in terms of like what is the ultimate goal of Vault-Tec. So originally you might think, well, you know, money and power. Money and power typically tends to do it with this sort of situations. The problem is that the world is over, right? The world has sort of ceased to exist for the most part, and a lot of this information is sort of useless in a lot of ways. Like we're talking about all of the psychological studies. Yeah, it's hard to see sometimes what kind of money and power you can get from having this information. Scientific stuff, it makes sense, right? We have the Institute from Fallout 4. The Institute never stopped working. They were safe from the bombs, they were safe from all the monsters, they just continued working, and now they are a power to be reckoned with. They have a lot of power within the Boston area. And you would think that Vault-Tec would be doing the same, but we really haven't seen much from Vault-Tec at all. We don't know what's going on. Are they kind of like the Institute? Are they working behind, you know, their walls somewhere underground? We don't really know. Now, this game actually gave us a glimpse into what it actually might be doing. So Vault 76 is all thanks to this vault. See, Vault 76 was one of the few vaults that were made to the specifications that they advertise, which in turn means they would grab in people They would teach them how to survive, they would give them food, they would make sure that they were healthy, you know, they would give them all the supplies that they needed so that 25 years later, when the doors of the vault opened into the new world, they would be able to repopulate the new world, they would be able to rebuild the new world, and everything would be fine and dandy. Now you can see very clearly that the area that they picked for this vault is very specific, right? West Virginia, if you see the footage that I'm showing you, if you actually go, you know, play the game in the beta or when it comes out, you will realize that this area wasn't really touched very hard by the war. You will notice that the forest is gorgeous, it's clean, there is really no radioactive kind of waste that has affected the trees very much. There's like beautiful grasslands, you know, rolling hills here and there. The roads have been broken by some of the missiles, but there were no clear nuclear detonations in most of the map. You can tell that the city is mostly untouched. There's of course no people living here anymore, which is obviously part of the game. Every single person you meet in the game is a real person. But the reason that these people are not here is not necessarily because of the war. In fact, it has to do something with the main story. I'm not going to spoil it for those of you still kind of going through the game in the beta, but there is a reason why everyone's dead, basically, and it actually has not that much to, well, it has obviously to do with the war, everything has to do with the war, but it was not because of the missiles and the actual, you know, war, which again goes back to my point that the war didn't really hit West Virginia too hard, which is interesting because the other maps, if you actually notice the other games, Fallout 4, Fallout 3, and New Vegas, those places were actually completely destroyed. And it makes complete sense, right? Of course, Washington, D.C. was going to be completely obliterated in a war, in a world war. Of course, Boston would have been completely annihilated. Of course, most of California would have been completely annihilated. Like, this makes sense within the context of the world, those being kind of, you know, hubs of a lot of economy, a lot of power, and would be places that the Chinese or the Russians would actually attack if a world war like this would actually take place. So putting vaults, you would notice that the vaults that actually were found in those areas were vaults that were mostly experimental. When you go and you play Fallout 4, most of the vaults in Boston were not made to be opened. You know, these were vaults that were meant to just be experiments. Why? Because there's no way that people would really thrive in a, you know, destroyed Boston. Of course we did. The human, I don't know, I guess what you call it, determination is fantastic. At least that's how they portray it in the game. So humans eventually survived and thrived even in this destroyed massive cities. But you would imagine that these people back in Vault-Tec would say there's no way that people would survive in Boston. There's no way that people would survive in Washington. So the vaults that we're going to put in there are not going to be made for people to survive. They're going to be made for us to experiment on them and then just, you know, oh, if they don't make it, then we'll say that the bombs got them, right? Like, who cares? It's not a big deal. But when you look at West Virginia, this place is ripe for rebuilding. It's ripe for repopulating the world. This place is gorgeous, it's beautiful. Most of the houses are untouched. This is perfect. So of course you're gonna put in a vault here that actually has a chance of doing what it is supposed to do. And that's just a very interesting thing. You'll realize that in the desert back in Nevada, there's a few of the Fallout, you know, games that are set in the Nevada desert. Those vaults actually did open, you know, and they were made to save people. Why? Because who would bomb the desert? There's nothing in there. So of course these people were going to survive. Of course there were going to be things that they could do. You know, it's particularly interesting, this process of viewing the game in this way. But back to the vault. I'm sorry, back to I'm kind of rambling a little bit. But Vault 76, there is a very specific reason why they picked West Virginia to be one of the main vaults. And you can tell that this vault specifically, it's not just a location, it's not just that they're gonna, you know, this vault was made to survive and to actually do what it was supposed to do, but more so than other vaults. You will notice that this particular vault actually gathered all of the most, you know, sort of like the smartest people. The cream of the crop when it came down to intelligence, when it came down to charisma, to strength. Like, the people in this vault were supposed to be the best people in the world. The people with the most potential in every single conceivable field. Which is interesting because that's not necessarily something that they ever did in any of the other locations, but they did it here. Why? Because there are 3 nuclear missile silos that Vault-Tec knew were not going to be used during the Great War. And it had seemed that the main objective of the Overseer was to actually go and secure this missile silos. Now, we sort of knew that already. That was sort of like, it's basically the main quest. We were told that during the reveal for Fallout 76 that there were going to be these missile silos, and we were supposed to, during the main quest, basically go and collect them. But what we didn't know has something to do with the secret mission given to the Overseer of Vault 76. Now, when you start the game and you're actually you're kind of collecting all the items, you're kind of going around the vault, you're supposed to follow this sort of pre-made track that the game gives you so that you can go and collect your camp, you can go and collect your Pip-Boy. They give you like some rations and some medicinal supplies so that you can, kind of just leave the vault and do God's work, basically. But, and the road, by the way, is like basically delineated by lights and by the little I guess Fallout little boys that are pointing in the right direction where you're supposed to go, but you don't have to follow that road. You don't have to follow the path that they give you. And if you don't, if you kind of go into the darkened areas, you can actually discover, you can explore most of the vault basically. So you can find like a kitchen, you can find there's like an exercising room, there's all the different rooms that you can find, but importantly, you can actually, if you go out of your way, you can get into the Overseer's room. And if you do, you can check out her computer. And in her computer, you can see messages that were sent to her by the Vault-Tec Corporation. And it specifically tells her, what her objective is, which is, of course, to get the silos. But what we did not know is some of the more specific nuances that they actually tell you, that sort of like the more secretive part of her mission. It's interesting because this is where it gets crazy. The Vault-Tec Corporation told the Overseer that, and it specifies that even if those nuclear missile silos are currently protected or are currently manned by the US government, that she needs to make sure to take them out and take the nuclear silos for Vault-Tec. And it specifies that the United States government does no longer have jurisdiction over this area, and that this area, West Virginia, now belongs to Vault-Tec. Now that blew my mind because it sort of showed the hand of Vault-Tec. Basically, it kind of shows what their end goal might actually be. They specify this place. They shows West Virginia to create the one of the few vaults that we're actually going to have people come out of. They grabbed the best people for this one vault. They handpicked the Overseer for this particular mission, for this one particular vault. And of course, there are missile silos here, and they want to take the missile silos, even if the United States government has control over them. They want to literally destroy the military to take those silos. I think it's pretty clear. Vault-Tec just wants to take over the country. Or maybe that's one of their objectives. You would imagine that at some point they might want to take over the world, but it just blew my mind, honestly. I guess I never thought about it that way, that maybe everything that they're doing, in the end, this might actually have been their end goal. To take over the United States, and they're going to be using some of these nuclear missiles to possibly do that, because, of course, this is just one of the vaults, but if they did this in other locations, maybe there are missile silos in Nevada, in the desert. Maybe there are some in Texas. Maybe there are some in North Dakota. Who knows, right? And maybe they have vaults in all the different places. And maybe their job of the Overseer and the people that are coming out of these vaults would have been to collect these missile silos and then basically hold all of the nuclear ordnance that is left over from the war and maybe use it to attack their enemies. It's pretty interesting. I don't know. Today we're going to be playing a lot more of the beta. The beta goes long today, as I said before, from 2 p.m. Eastern to about 11. So we're going to get a lot of time in. Hopefully we can discover some more juicy stuff today. I'll be letting you guys know if I do. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. A little bit rambly. I know. I'm sorry. Just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about this because I haven't really talked to you guys in a while. Just sort of doing these commentaries that I love to do. So hopefully I'll be seeing you guys the day after tomorrow. We'll be trying to work on a video or something. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.